So you said it was bulk wine production through the 60s, and obviously today it's very different.
That's right, and then a lot of the wine, most all the wine that was grown, the grapes that were grown in Sonoma County, were crushed in Sonoma County, and that wine all went into bulk wine production, and the major wine companies from the Central Valley would come and bid on the tanks of wine from these small wineries and buy that wine when it was stable enough to be transported, and that would usually be in January or February of the following year up until harvest of the following year, because that little winery would have to have that wine sold by the time he was ready to put the next year's production in it. And so that was kind of a buyer's market for a lot of years. And the grape industry here stayed pretty stagnant until, because of the fact that the prices were so low that you could grow other crops and get more return on your investment than grape growing.
How did the contracts work for growers when you were selling for bulk wine?
Well, in those days there wasn't such a thing in this area as a contract. It was all a handshake from that winery, and the grower and winery respected the handshake.
When did the grower get paid?
Usually the growers, it would depend upon the winery that you sold your grape to. At that time, most of it was that within 10 days or so after you harvested your grape and the winery took it into production, they paid you 50% of what the price per ton was going to be. And then usually right around January or February, you got of the following year, you got the other half. That was when that particular winery sold that wine, and he got paid from the major producer.
Was the price negotiated between the major producer and the winery ahead of time, or did the major producer decide?
Yeah, the major producer, whoever, most small wineries in this area just sold their bulk wine to the highest bidder, and there was 3 to 5 if the wine was fairly good wine. That 3 to 5 buyers would come and sample that wine, and then they would make an offer for that wine. That was when they were would be any time from December until February of the next year. So the wine business remained pretty stable for a lot of years. It didn't fluctuate very much. Very low price. Usually at that time it was like $35 or $40 a ton for the grape, and it would vary just a few dollars unless it was a particular year that there was a short crop, and in a lot of cases the wineries would get a bonus for a better quality wine made, and they would pass that along to the grower as a supplement to their income later in the year, because in those days it was the grower was and the winery owners lived side by side, so there wasn't a big, everyone was pretty honest to each other. I'm sorry, it's not always that way anymore.
When did who were the major wineries? What were the wines called that people were drinking at the time? Those major wineries that were buying in bulk and putting them in bottle, what were the brands?
Oh, well, they all had their own brands or several brands. Actually, what there was white wines, table wines. That was called just white, or a lot of them called it Saturn. It wasn't what you know Saturn today. It was a white wine, and the red wines was called burgundy.
Was it Was it Ernest and Julio Gallo at the time? Was it other people? What were
Yes, there were several. Gallo wasn't the large buyer at that particular time. Of course, I couldn't tell you positively because we weren't in the wine business. We were grape growers, and we sold to our neighbor. But Roma Wine Company was a big wine company, and before Gallo even got started, there was there was a big winery in Geyser called California Wine Company, I guess it was called, and they labeled 2 or 3 varieties. Some of the wines here went to
Italian Swiss colony. Italian Swiss colony.
But that Italian Swiss colony was a grower organized one then, and they actually was owned by basically by the growers, and they contracted to Italian Swiss colony, made the wine there for them, and then they sold it bulk they didn't bottle wine and sell it as bulk. Italian Swiss colony had their own, they call it Tipo or whatever their brand was. It was the largest the bottle winery that we had, but they were very selective in what they bought. So it wasn't a big bottle winery like we have today, where they make millions of cases. They crushed a lot of grapes there, but they sold a lot of it bulk.
When did the system start to change from bulk to individual bottling? And where did you buy your own wine before wines were sold in bottle, but it was more bulk? What did you drink at the time?
Well, of course, when I grew up, we made our own wine at home. So, and I was raised during the Depression, so we didn't have a lot of dollars, and no one in the area did. So we made my dad always would make 200 gallons of wine, and we'd use part of it for a barter system to trade to friends and neighbors for other commodities that we didn't grow, and they didn't grow grapes or make wine. And of course, when you could go to any of the bulk wineries that was after prohibition, and when they decided to the BATF wasn't really that organized at that particular time, and the bulk winery consisted, they had to have a permit to make wine, and it was, and they could, the minimum amount that they could sell was 5 gallons, 5 gallons to infinity. So an individual could go there with your own 5-gallon carafe or 5-gallon jugs or whatever, and you could buy 5 gallons from that particular winery. Most of it was not aged wine. It was wine that maybe was kept from the previous year, so it was usually 1 year old or less. And you would buy yours, and they would draw it right from a barrel.
Was it all kept in barrel?
It was always kept in barrel. There was nothing in glass.
Barrel the size we think of today, or were they bigger?
Well, there was, you could even get it from the tanks sometimes, because there was no stainless steel or metal tanks. They were oak or redwood. There were some big tanks that were redwood, and most of it that you would get then was in a standard barrel size, which is around 60 gallons.
Do you remember what 5 gallons cost?
Oh yeah, for many, many years you bought wine at $1 a gallon.
Is that what Fred sells it for? So at what point did it start to change from selling grapes for bulk wine to selling grapes for individual bottles of wine in Sonoma?
Well, it was a very gradual change, actually. Napa County started with smaller bottled wine. They had a couple large ones that were owned by large corporations for years, but we didn't have one in Sonoma County where they bottled and sold the bottled wine there. But it was like, it wasn't a varietal, and it wasn't vineyard designated, and it wasn't county designated. It was California wine. So they would buy wine from growers that they felt raised the quality grape that they want from Sonoma and Napa County, and it all went into the same wineries. That took part of it from here. Here, a couple. There was one in Hillsburg that had been there for many, many, many years, and that was Fabiano Wine Company.
When did they start?
Beg pardon?
When did they start?
Oh, it must have been, it was before they bottled wine and sold it. Well, I only remember it just prior to World War II. But they were there and made wines. This Louis Fabiano's father started that, and Louis is 96 years old now. And now they have their own wine production. They bought some grapes. Now they have them, mostly it's all vineyard designated, that they own their own winery.
At what point did the change to bottling really start? Was that in the 60s?
Yeah, it was probably, well, before that, a few small ones, but it didn't make it didn't change the bulk wine philosophy in Sonoma County at that time. It just took up their own, or a few from a neighbor vineyard or something. This happened probably, well, Sebastiani had been making wine for a lot of years, and it was probably in the 60s and 70s that they really started big production and started buying grapes from this area. And of course Gallo had bought grapes from the small bulk wineries, and also they bought all the grapes from a winery in Dry Creek called Fry Brothers, and now they own all that property, and they have a label called Fry Brothers wine, and they also have but they didn't bottle any wine here. It was all taken to Modesto and all bottled down in that area. Then we got some, like I had said, that as the farmers that had farmed here prior to World War II died or got too old to farm anymore, and if they had children they didn't care to be in agriculture, then those properties were bought by other people, and some of those started their little wineries like Geyserville.
Geyser Peak?
Hmm?
Geyser Peak? Geyser Peak?
Well, Geyser Peak was there. You see, it was a small winery, but was kind of designated. They were their own property plus a few. So they really, it really wasn't a bottled wine producer that would buy much grape from anyone. So that's why we stayed. There was Simi in Hillsburg, but it was small. The winery's still in operation now. Now it's big. but they didn't make an impact in the area, any of those, until 2 or 3 of those small ones started, and they did well, and then we got this wall-to-wall wineries now. You know, they're still growing. We're still getting more for some reason.